Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. We'll give it 1 more minute and then we'll start. Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, good night, everybody. My name is Susana Ramirez. I'm part of the Catalyst 2030 team. I'm very excited to welcome you to this roundtable in food security and agriculture. I will be helping you all today with the logistic part of this session. So before we start, I just wanted to say a couple of logistical remarks. So the first one is that this session is being recorded and that it will be published in our Catalyst 2030 webpage in a couple of days. Please feel free to use the chat box during the session to raise up any of your questions. We'll be checking this regularly. And after this session, you will be receiving all feedback form from our team, just to see part of your feedback from this session. So welcome again, and I'll hand over to Mindy.
Welcome, and we're so delighted you've joined us today. Thank you to the Catalyst team and to all our partners, and a special thank you to our speakers. We've assembled a fantastic group of speakers, and I'll introduce them briefly, but clearly this is a roundtable, so everybody who has engaged is an expert in some capacity, and we want to hear your voice. Today we have Atsuko Toda. She's a Director of Agricultural Finance and Rural Infrastructure Development at the African Development Bank. She has a wealth of experience and spent over 20 years at IFAD, wearing many, many hats. And I met Atsuko when she was the head of the IFAD office in Nigeria, and just loved her passion for the region and her dedication to financing agriculture. Second, we have Lisa, who is the founding president, Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia. She wears many, many hats and has over 25 years of experience in development management and consulting, and has published widely. Her passion is really around the role of social entrepreneurs in leading social change. We have Luis Garnego, who is with EPA, and I'll let him pronounce it because unfortunately my Spanish is very, very bad. He has a wealth of experience as a social entrepreneur, as a Schwab Fellow, as an Ashoka Fellow, but he's doing amazing work in Colombia and in Latin America as the co-founder of the Weaving Lab, the core member of the Regenerative Communities Network, and founder of a range of initiatives. And last but not least, definitely, we have Dr. Roy Steiner, who is the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. I'm a proud board member of the Rockefeller Foundation, and I just adore Roy for his commitment to radical change and rethinking food systems globally. Roy comes to the Rockefeller Foundation from the Omidyar Network, and before that, he was at the Gates Foundation. He has extensive experience on the African continent as well, and a deep passion for transformation. And I'll just give you a brief intro to myself. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of Sahel Consulting. We work across Africa, transforming the agriculture and food landscape, and the co-founder of Ace Foods, which is an agro-processing company. So I'm so delighted that we have such a core group of people with us today, and I thank you for your time and your passion for this topic. Let's just put up the slides so that we can walk through the history of Catalyst 2030 and what we're trying to accomplish today. So our agenda today is really just to introduce Catalyst 2030, and then our speakers will spend 5 minutes sharing very practical recommendations for food security. And immediately after that, we'll break out into groups. Depending on how many people end up in the session, will be between 5 and 20 in each breakout group, where you really have some time to interrogate these recommendations and come up with very concrete solutions. And then we're going to have a joint discussion after that. And already I'm going to be appealing to you. If you're really passionate and want to stay involved with this working group, please sign up. Please put in your chat and say, I want to get involved, because we want this to be as practical as possible. Next. So Catalyst 2030 is a global community of social entrepreneurs, funders, and social change innovators who believe in collective action. It's really a consortium with entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs from the Skoll Foundation, Schwab Foundation, Ashoka, and Echoing Green, all committed to working together to ensure that we can achieve the SDGs. And the One Family Foundation has really been a great asset in putting us together and drawing people from across the world. Next. So this campaign is really action-oriented. It's different from a lot of the other campaigns that you might have been exposed to, because the focus is on sharing what social entrepreneurs are doing around COVID-19, collaborative partnerships, co-creating policy recommendations, initiating dialogue, sharing solutions, and reimagining what the world should be like. We all agree that COVID-19 has rattled a lot of us and upended our world, but what it's also done is given us a new platform to rethink, reimagine, and rebuild. And that's what Catalyst 20 is really about. It was established before COVID-19, but COVID-19 has given us a new lease on life around rebuilding and redesigning together. Next. So just to set the context so that we're all on the same page, you know, in March, I was on a number of webinars where people were saying, oh, food is not really going to be an issue going into this. It's a health crisis. And I was at that time, you know, screaming from the rooftops, let's ensure that hunger doesn't kill more people than COVID-19. And now we're end of May, entering June, and all news headlines, it doesn't matter what part of the world you are in, are talking about food, even in the United States. From panic buying in Europe to bans on rice exports in Asia to rising food prices in my backyard, the fragility of our food ecosystem has been exposed by the coronavirus. In fact, the World Food Programme expects that the number of people facing a food crisis is going to double just because of COVID-19. And this is a projection that is shared globally. Next. In my backyard, in the African context, and in Nigeria in particular, I think COVID-19 has revealed a few truths. The first is that there's an absence of credible data on food markets, where the most vulnerable are, where there's an abundance of food, and how to shift from one region to the next. Our social safety nets are very weak, especially in my region, around supporting the poor. But even in the United States, some food banks are reporting that they can only meet 30 to 40% of the needs in their cities. There are poor grain reserves and national emergency response systems. We have very disorganized markets that don't lend themselves effectively to social distancing, fragmented food ecosystems, and a very broken chain globally, poor policy frameworks, and many of our SMEs are struggling. And this is what we are seeing. In fact, through many of the hats I wear, about 50% of our SMEs have had to shut down because of COVID-19. Next. One very practical intervention, which we launched a few months ago, is called nourishingafrica.com. And it's a one-stop shop for 1 million entrepreneurs, envisaged as a home for entrepreneurs to build resilient businesses and to scale, leveraging ag tech and innovation. And right now, we've pivoted dramatically to helping our entrepreneurs reimagine what role they can play in the food ecosystem. And this is one very practical intervention, because we believe that we need to help entrepreneurs with financing, appropriate financing, training, knowledge, skills, matchmaking to enable them to scale. And nourishingafrica.com is just one of the ideas that we're spearheading. And so at this point, I'll stop there and invite Louise to Lisa to start us off with her interventions. Lisa, please unmute. You're muted.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, depending on your time context. I prepared some policy proposals for transforming our food security and agricultural landscape amidst COVID-19, basically from my perspective in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And I'd be sharing with you some of the proposals emanating from the work we've been doing even prior to COVID-19. But COVID-19 has really shown the importance of local food systems, of food sovereignty of households and communities. And actually, even before COVID-19, as early as 2013, the UN Conference on Trade and Development came up with an environment with a report that actually called on making agriculture truly sustainable for food security in a changing climate. And that publication in 2013 that actually was developed with the help of over 50 experts all over the world, made two conclusions, that hunger and malnutrition is actually mainly related to the lack of purchasing power and ability of the rural poor to be self-sufficient. So that meeting food security challenges is primarily about the empowerment of the poor, meaning to say their control over resources, their control over decisions, and their food sovereignty. Next slide, please. So that the first policy proposal that I'd like to make in relation to food security and agriculture is it is important that we are able to shift policy and practice towards mainstreaming sustainable agriculture. Of course, our farmers need to be given or provided recovery programs, and it's important that we orient the recovery programs for small farmers and agricultural workers towards scaling up and mainstreaming sustainable agriculture that is linked to social entrepreneurship and seed-to-table food systems promoting sustainable consumption and production. What does this mean in practice? It means control over seeds. What's readily available in the market is actually hybrid seeds. And hybrid seeds are seeds that would deteriorate over time. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, as part of my responsibility as team leading a cooperative effort to engage the Department of Agriculture, we actually engaged them to procure hybrid, open pollinated varieties of vegetable seeds, as opposed to hybrid seeds. And it's very important that seed sovereignty is actually given back to communities and farmers through open pollinated varieties, inbred, as well as traditional varieties of seeds. This is very important because hybrid seeds deteriorate over time, and open pollinated varieties as well as inbred and traditional varieties can stay for 10-15 years, and they could still be replanted by farmers and communities and not controlled by corporations. A second implication of this is that there's a need for a comprehensive and responsive extension system promoting sustainable agriculture. Actually, for years already, there have been successful models for 1 to 3 hectare farms, promoting regenerative agriculture technologies. And one of the experts in this is Dr. Julian Gonsalves, who's actually part of our roundtable tonight as a participant. And if there would be time, he would be sharing with you some of this sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture technologies that have been proven to actually be effective in improving the productivity and improving the incomes of small farmers and improving their food security as well. Also, there's a need for the development of participatory guarantee systems for safe food, no? And for local food systems to actually be healthy and pro-poor. So the first major shift that we need to do in relation to improving our food and agriculture system is a shift in policy and practice towards mainstreaming sustainable agriculture. The second policy recommendation that I'd like to share, next slide please, is to enable social enterprises as partners of small producers and the poor in building back better. What are social enterprises? They're social mission-driven businesses that are actually working with the poor and small producers to enable them to become stakeholders of the economy. And before COVID-19, in the Philippines, where I live, there was already a clamor from the Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship Coalition to actually enact a law and put in place a program called Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship. What kind of program is this? This is actually a national program that puts strategic economic subsectors where the poor are concentrated and where they could be major players as units of planning, and in the process make social enterprises become the transformational partners of the poor and small producers in order for them to be stakeholders in agricultural value chains and food systems and in the economy as a whole. And in the Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship bill that we are lobbying for, nowhere have we seen the importance of its urgency, given the need for the recovery of social enterprises as partners of the poor in building back better. No? And this will entail hybrid financing, meaning a combination of grants and non-collateralized loans, maybe even soft loans, given the need for recovery. Market development that would promote fair trade as well as ethical markets. Also engaging government so that they actually can do special allocations and preferential treatments in government procurement of such, for example, in schools for the feeding programs, in relief for the food packs, that this can come from cooperatives and social enterprises working with farmers and small producers. And then it also includes tax exemptions and tax breaks, as well as cash incentives. So this is the kind of package that we need for a poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship program, engaging small farmers and also producers to build back better given COVID-19 and to build back to develop our food system that is based on sustainable agriculture. Next slide, please. Also before
Lisa, you have to round up. You have to round up, okay?
Yeah, okay. Even before COVID-19, we were engaged in the promotion of a social entrepreneurship SDG acceleration platform with UNSCAP. We were actually promoting a set of benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains in ASEAN and in 4 countries, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And so the third policy proposal is to integrate and incentivize food security, resilience, and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chain development. That's my last slide. And basically what this means, you see, is that when we talk about food systems, when we talk about agriculture, we talk about farmers and fishers, they're usually men. Women are usually invisible in agricultural value chains. And what we're needing to do is to integrate women's economic empowerment as part of agricultural value chain development. And what do we mean when we say food security and resilience as part of agricultural value chain development? No matter what the agricultural value chain program, there must be a food security component where small producers are assisted to actually grow their own food. So these are just practical 3 practical policy recommendations for our food system and agriculture amidst COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Very, very effective and comprehensive interventions. Luis, you're up. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Nididi. Thanks, Marlisa. As Nididi was saying, COVID-19 has definitely put a pressure on the food systems. Next. We have seen, and we're working in Latin America, trying to understand how to respond to COVID-19, especially in areas where tourism had shifted all production of food in areas, and there's no supply of food at the moment. And this has put a huge pressure in accessibility of food for people and has reduced definitely well-being in the different populations. We're working in Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. Next. And we have realized that one thing that is critical right now is to, next slide, please. We need to go back to basics, and we need to make sure that whatever we do, policy is directed to guarantee the basic needs of the people that are living in the land. And this includes food. So part of the work we have been doing is, as a response for COVID-19, is to guarantee we can connect all small farmers and rural communities and start sharing the knowledge they have in regenerative agriculture and community building in such a way they can start fast tracking and activating the capacity to produce food very quickly and to start sustaining their own communities. Next. Yeah. And this is a multi-organization alliance where a lot of people are participating and going beyond the logos into the echoes. And I think this is one of the spirits that we need to embrace in new policy. Next slide, please. So going into the direction for policy, we have to go back to basics, and we have to look at planetary boundaries and make them our planetary priorities. And I know this might sound very basic, but the basic is what we're missing. Next slide. So if we look at planetary boundaries and the four most stressed areas in the planet, we need to focus our priorities there because agriculture is related to all of them. We need to increase our capacity for improving biodiversity, agrobiodiversity, and recuperating seeds and making sure that our seeds are resilient. We need to strengthen soil or strengthen and increase soil regeneration and restoration. We need to focus on agroforestry and conservation, generating functional landscapes that really embrace the interconnectedness between conservation and production. And we need to work to reduce carbon footprint. And in agriculture, huge carbon. In Colombia, it's over 60% of the emissions. So it's a really high priority area where we really need to focus at local and regional regenerative agriculture, soil carbon sequestration, and what's evolving in this area, and the reduction of emissions in the reduction of use of agrochemicals and other needs. And in the focused policies, we really need to start focusing on priority for bioregional food security strategies with regenerative focuses. In this, we need to really, governments need to support and incentivize local production for local regional consumption and then expanding towards global markets. We need to shift and turn the pyramid upside down in order to guarantee that with whatever situation that is coming, like COVID-19 or climate change, we can guarantee local access to food and well-being. And this will create fair and competitive conditions for people, and will guarantee that we start building participatory and social active policies, promoting collaboration, creating fair and just local labor associated to agricultural production and conservation, and gender and age inclusive systems of production. So this is our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, and thank you for sharing the perspective from Latin America. We're going to move to Roy Steiner now, and he has some very practical recommendations. Roy.
Hi, thank you, Nidhi, and thanks, Luis. Well, let me just start with saying, you know, I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, this COVID-19 is really a kind of a dress rehearsal for climate change. We're going to see more and more shocks that are unexpected. And so we need to use this crisis as a way to rebuild and redesign. Secondly, if we ever needed a reason to understand that, you know, food systems are interconnected, COVID is, it's important to remember that actually, you know, 5 months ago, someone in China made a food choice, they made a choice about what they eat for dinner. And 5 months later, the entire world economy is brought to a standstill. If we ever needed evidence that we are interconnected, interdependent, and what you eat matters, we have it with COVID. So I think just to ground everybody how important food systems are and how interconnected they are and how important it is to emphasize collaboration and cooperation. I think we have that here, and yet the world, we're really kind of at a balance, at a point where we can either choose to collaborate and cooperate more effectively, or we can go back into our narrow little nationalistic shells, which we know doesn't work. It's no longer relevant to the kind of world we have today. However, so my first recommendation is we need to ensure that actually, if you can go back, we need to ensure that trade continues to flow. There's actually the quantity of food in the world is adequate. The problem is distribution. The problem is information. And one of the real things we understand is, you know, and we've been talking about this for a while, we actually don't have, especially in Africa, really good food balance data. So people make uninformed decisions to close borders, to ban exports, when in fact, that's not the problem. And in fact, in 2008, that's the issue that caused so much of the challenges in the food system. And 15 countries this time also immediately started to do banning acts. And it turned out, luckily, it wasn't as much of a response as before, but we need better data. And we have satellites, we have information technologies can enable that. And then the other is to keep green corridors, make sure that we have the right kinds of protocols to ensure safe transport of food when that's needed. Next slide. The second is I think one of the most disturbing things that happened was the closing of fresh markets. And in many cities around the world, 95% of the nutrients come through those fresh markets. But more importantly, it employs hundreds of thousands of people, not just the people selling, but the people supplying. And we need to create systems so that even in times of crisis, like these things can keep going. And that means redesigning them. If you can click a little bit more, I have some more text. We can use enabling technologies that we didn't exist before. What about redesigning all of our fresh markets across the world so they're actually solar microgrids, and using digital ordering so that we can rebuild and strengthen these communal, these cooperative efforts such as farmers markets. One interesting note is, 20 years ago, there was only a few hundred farmers markets in the United States, and there was a recognition that there is real need for them to be in parallel to supermarkets. We're not getting rid of supermarkets, but we need, in order to create resilient systems and fresh systems, we need those farmers markets. Now there's over 4,000 in the US. Why do we have to destroy farmers markets and then have to rebuild them? Let's just start rebuilding them now all over the world so that we really enable small and medium-sized farmers to have market outlets that provide them with resilient markets. The other is, I think everybody has noticed, knows that SMEs are the lifeblood and the employers of the world's vulnerable people, and they are the ones who are suffering so much. And so, as I think Ndidi has mentioned, we need better ways to keep those SMEs functioning and enabling them access to working capitals in new ways. And finally, next please. We can't go back to just thinking about calories and quantity. It has to be about nutrition. We know with COVID, people with diet-related diseases like diabetes, etc., are 4 times more likely to die. So nutrition matters. Your immune system matters. And so let's not forget that. And it's a diversity of food that's needed to be kept flowing, not just the staples, which everybody focuses on. And then finally, I think this issue, so many hundreds of millions of children depend on schools for their meals, and we have to pay special attention and have policy specific to making sure in times of crisis that continues to provide the nutrition the next generation needs, because we know if you don't get nutrition at that point in life, there's a lifelong impact on individuals and their potential. And then last slide, one of the things the Rockefeller Foundation did was we launched a Food System Vision Prize, and it exceeded everybody's expectations. We had several thousand organizations apply amazing visions. And what that told us, a couple of things. One is there's a real hunger and need to re-envision the food systems we have all over the world. Second, it looks very different depending on where you are. Blanket statements about food systems, I think, are problematic. However, almost all of them have some basic principles that they believe in. We believe everywhere in the world, food systems need to be more equitable, more sustainable, more resilient, and more healthful. And I think if we ground our food systems, have a process that involves everybody in their design, I think we can use this crisis to create the food system we all want and need. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Ndidi.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you. I'm so excited about the Food System Vision Prize. And when you came up with it, we didn't know we were going to need to design the sense of urgency that you felt. Now the rest of the world feels it. So thank you for your work. And last but not least, we have Atsuko. Please share with us some of your recommendations.
Sure, thanks a lot, Ndidi. And I really like to say I really appreciated the presentations from other parts of the world. And actually, the recommendations really corroborate what the other speakers have been saying. I'll focus on Africa. As you can see on the first slide here, the performance of most food supply chains in Africa is driven by the productive capacity of small farms, just like the woman you see here. There has been a steady but very slow pace of development in the rural areas in Africa. And the question really, as Ndidi has mentioned, is whether this COVID crisis will provide the political and economic impetus to really accelerate African agriculture. Next slide. So just a couple of impacts that COVID-19 has had in Africa. I mean, we've seen that around the world, COVID-19 is having huge impact. It's being sequenced and hopefully not protracted. In Africa, COVID-19 has caused disruption in food supply chains, lowered purchasing power, and increased food prices. And these impacts, like the other speakers have said, could potentially have a huge impact on access to food. In Africa, logistic disruptions for food supply chains are both very challenging for those countries that have a lot of food imports, but they're also very challenging where there's cross-border trade. We were talking to a company just this morning whereby they actually get soybean from Malawi and they have a processing plant in Rwanda. But because the soybean is not moving, the farmer cooperatives who are doing the soy might be forced to sell for a lower price, and companies will have to find alternative sources. Now, what this really impacts is the longer-term trust between suppliers and the market, and that breakdown is very hard. And as was mentioned, the informal sector in Africa is the backbone of the economy of the poor. Market contractions, partly but because of the decline in travel and tourism, could involve millions of Africans, up to 80 million Africans, and they see their incomes drop even further. Remittance for Africans, from Africans working abroad is also declining. And also, COVID-19 has come at a time when commodity prices have been falling. As you know, oil prices have gone down and African currencies are being devalued. Next slide. With regards to some of the COVID-associated risks, those risks include what Roy just mentioned. There could be an increase in trade and movement restrictions that would be extremely painful. There's also possibly declines in agricultural production and a shortage of liquidity, which Ndidi mentioned, particularly for SMEs, and this could negatively impact food security. We've already seen that in past crises, stockpiling and protectionist trade measures negatively impact food availability. It is a high concern for African countries where imports include wheat, maize, sugar, rice, milk, and soybean. Wheat and rice in particular are sourced from a few concentrated agricultural exporters, so that is a worry. Two, with regards to restrictions on movement, it may be a challenge to get inputs to farmers in rural areas coinciding with planting seasons. Farmers may not opt to harvest if markets are too difficult to access. The World Bank has estimated that agricultural production in Africa could decline by up to 7% in 2020. Micro, small, medium enterprises. I think the aspect that Ndidi has mentioned so many times is about the importance of these value chains, of these micro, small, medium enterprises to food supply chains. They provide 60 to 80% of employment in sub-Saharan Africa, but they risk becoming insolvent. And that is a major issue going forward because 80% of food consumption in Africa by urban and rural consumers is actually from these food supply chains. Next slide, please. So with regards to policy options, what's very critical is prioritization, particularly in Africa where fiscal capacity is limited. Social safety nets are very difficult because fiscal space and deficits are, fiscal space is smaller and deficits are estimated to widen. I think Roy mentioned about having food flow, just countries refraining from putting in place food export and import barriers, but also internal free flow of trade, and that's extremely important. Supporting production of food for upcoming planting seasons is extremely important without actually subsidizing, but providing market instruments. Next slide, please. So as everybody is mentioning, this crisis is an opportunity for stimulating policy action and investment because we are forced to do so. There is a general trend. If you could just click again to get some of the side slides, please, the side notes. There is a trend of shorter, more resilient supply chains in other parts of the world, and Africa will need to invest itself in a new food system. The intra-regional food supply chains allowing for more regional food security will be critical. And two, stimulating private sector investment, particularly in the middle of the value chains, which includes integrating e-commerce, e-market platforms, storage, food processing, will be extremely important. Next slide, please. So with that, it is abundantly clear that we need to have urgent coordinated actions. I'd be very happy to take any questions or comments in the breakout session. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Atsuko, and thank you to our 4 brilliant speakers. I know I gave you very limited time, but the reason is because we actually want to do some of the heavy lifting in the breakout sessions. And you're all experts, and we know that you have a lot to share. And there are going to be people saying, well, we've heard some of this before. Why haven't we done it? What's holding us back? The sense of urgency that you've all expressed is critical, but what we need now is action. And the great thing is I've looked at the participant list and we have people who are entrepreneurs, we have policymakers, we have nonprofit executives. We have such a great group of experts who are joining our breakout groups. So in the breakout sessions, we have 25 minutes to discuss three questions. What are the known systemic approaches or shovel-ready solutions to approaching this issue of food security? And we ask you participants to share your own work and start exploring cross-sector collaborations. Number two, what is preventing these solutions from having broad traction or ability to scale? And number three, what recommendations do we have that we can address? And I think in this group, because we have social entrepreneurs, all of you are change makers yourself, let's get practical. What can we do? What do we need government to do? And coming out of this, all of us have been assured that we're going to amplify the voices from this conversation. We're going to be writing articles, we're going to be presenting to the UN next month, but we're also going to be presenting to some of our governments. And so it's really some of our governments and funders as well as financiers. So this is not just the talk shop. So I just want to underscore that. So those are the three questions, and the moderators and the speakers are going to be in charge of the breakout session. So Roy, Atsuko will help you because I know you have to bounce up a little early, but we'll have someone work alongside you. Louise and Lisa will be leading the discussions in their groups. And sadly, we can't put you into regional groups. It's going to be a slightly random. Please, we apologize in advance, but some people registered and didn't show up. So please be ready to collaborate with any region. We have so much to learn from each other. So you're going to start being taken away now into your breakout groups. So it's going to happen organically. And if you have
Good afternoon. We are assigning the remaining people to a specific breakout room for further discussions. So for the ones that are here in this room, just be patient. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear Marlene and Benga. We have been splitting all the participants in breakout rooms. Please let us know if you have any technical issue, but you should have been received a pop-up window asking you to join a session. Just please click on join.
So if you are like me, you probably felt that that was way too short.
Yes, bring us back.
And we were getting started. And I had a great group from Brazil and Colombia and Indonesia and Nigeria and the Philippines. It was like such a phenomenal conversation, and I've learned so much from my group, and I'm sure you guys learned a lot from your group. So thank you so much. And sadly, we can't accomplish everything in such a short time, but I'm going to ask the team leaders from each group to just share one or two great insights that they got from their group, which will benefit the rest of us. So who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Thank you.
We were in a very interesting group, mostly with people from Africa, Nigeria, and many different parts, and all over the world as well. And we are saying that a way to address the problem is to promote regenerative agriculture, which considers local resources, local seeds, doesn't need deforestation, so it's can produce like 100 products in one area and keeping the forest. And we are saying that this is against the mainstream approach, the way we do agriculture nowadays. And therefore, a way to overcome this would be that we would have other ways, many ways to exchange experiences and co-create solutions among practitioners. There are already a few experiences on this field of exchanging solutions and among practitioners. I don't know if someone wants to complement what I'm saying, but mostly is this.
Thank you, Gisela. I think we all agree that we can learn so much from each other, and this ability to co-create is just the beginning. One of the things we're going to ask you to do is, if you want to stay involved in this group and really help champion it, please send a message under the comment section so that we can reach out to you, because we want a smaller group that will really take this forward, some of the ideas that come out of this. So if you are motivated based on what Gisela has said, please engage. Can we hear from Roy next?
Hi, Ndidi. Yes, so we also had a very diverse group from Norway, Nigeria, India, UK, Spain. I think that the main issue that came up was what is local food system sustainability actually mean, and what's the role of trade and export, and I think there was a common agreement that this, COVID has shown we really do need shorter supply chains, not to eliminate exports, but the more you can grow your food locally, the more resilient you will be, and it creates employment, etc. And when things get broken in these shocks, you can survive. The other main point was this is also a reminder of the behavior change, where we need to shift the way we're eating and how we're eating and the kinds of foods we're eating if we want to really have a healthy and sustainable food system. Anybody from the group who wants to add to that?
Okay. Yeah, we were cut off a little earlier, so we didn't get to go through all the interesting things we were discussing. But I want to back now these great discussions we had in our group with absolutely the most important thing is to bring the possibilities of local production for local distribution at lowest cost possible. So I was planning to show my group some solutions on how to do this, and I see that we probably won't have time now, but I would like to just briefly say that there are accessible now, or there is about to be distributed and built and sold some agricultural structures to cope with rough weather and locusts and so on, consisting of a cheap material which is insulated by soap bubbles. So if anyone is interested in discussing this further, either after this session today or further, please connect with us, and we're happy to show this technology to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf, and thank you, Roy. I think what Roy says is so critical: shorter value chains, and I'll lead that up from great contributions from Teresa and others in my group around Brazil as a case study, and how policies being utilized to ensure local sourcing, where 30% of your food has to be sourced from local farmers, in some regions up to 70%, and how that has created a whole ecosystem that needs to be supported. The second key takeaway from my group was the importance of information flows and the leveraging digital technology and innovation to really bridge the information asymmetry, whether it's looking for seasonal workers or looking for produce and seeds. That what COVID-19 has done is really rattled our traditional value chains and created a sense of urgency to bridge information gaps. And I think there's some very concrete ideas for how to do that, and that came out in my group. And then the third one is the importance of municipalities and community engagement in shaping city law and city processes and municipal government policies, and even shaping how the structure of markets work, and having that ownership resident in communities and community groups, and building civil society around that. So I think that was a really good idea. And we can think through systematically how to do that, and what best practice examples we can elevate and share across the world. Okay, can we hear from the other groups? Lisa.
Yes.
Go ahead, Louise.
Okay, so my group agreed in terms of, transportation and resilience threatened by global markets, and the importance to strengthen local food production in different ways, even going to some of the most vulnerable places and looking for strategies to start from family production to community to bioregional. So start growing even from the home in terms of production. Another point that was important in our group was the issue for people requiring assistance right now in food access. So there's a lot of people, not only because of COVID, but also because of conflict in different regions of the world where food access is very limited and food assistance is also restricted. So there's a huge issue in that sense that requires a lot more awareness, and it requires a little bit of attention. Another something associated to that was very interesting was the idea, in areas where there is conflict, to stop fighting and start planting as a strategy to potentialize local food production. On the other hand, and as a key point, giving voice to local actors and creating what was called step-down trainings, which in Africa and Latin America we're seeing is critical, where farmers can learn from each other in local language and diverse communication systems. So word by or mouth to mouth, images, diagrams, or whatever is needed to give cultural relevance to creating some of the local techniques for regenerative food production. And the last thing is stressing the need to connect health and food production in policy. So in ministries and in governments, to connect both health, environment, and agriculture as a triad that needs to work together to look for solutions, not only, in an integrated and holistic approach.
Fantastic. Thank you, Luis. Sounds like you had a very productive session. Marie-Lisa? You're muted, Marie-Lisa. You have to unmute.
Yeah, we didn't have much time to discuss, but we started with the policy proposals that I shared and ended up having some discussion expressing the importance of smallholder-based local food systems that are environment friendly, that address employment and unemployment, and that help people that help smallholders to overcome poverty, and the importance of regenerative agriculture technologies that intensify and diversify small farms was actually emphasized. Maybe Julian, you would want to say something more?
The point we were making as a group, and I'm not sure whether there was a common understanding of the point that some of us were making about the validity of smallholders and the potential of smallholders in a COVID situation being quite substantial, and the need to capitalize on the opportunities presented by smallholders in this context, and also the issue of how can we incentivize smallholders so that they can be entrepreneurs, and in that context be able to strengthen the local food system.
Fantastic. Did we have any more breakout groups that I might have missed, or does this capture everybody? Because I know Atsuko had to drop off. Okay, perfect. So
I was in her group, Didi.
Okay,
so.
Fantastic. So she's been captured. Fantastic. All right, so let me just try to wrap up, and then I'll have the helpers also say a few things. This is just a taste, and this is a big issue. Food security is a huge issue that we're all grappling with in our regions. And clearly, we have a lot to learn from each other. You know, when Jeru and I spoke about this session, I wanted to make it just focused on Africa. And Jeru said, no, it has to be global. And now I know why she insisted it be global. Because we have so much to learn from other regions. We have common problems. And what COVID-19 has shown us is that we have a lot of similar weaknesses in our ecosystem. So this is one opportunity to collectively address this issue. We plan on having subsequent workshops after this. We made this more of a roundtable instead of a webinar because we wanted to learn from each other. And some key takeaways, it's tough to summarize what everybody has said, but if I had to pick 5 key takeaways, the first one is that there's an urgent need for local engagement, local sourcing, rebuilding local food systems. The second is where we can, we have to trade and create an enabling environment for trade, but trade that is empowering and resilient and transparent. The third is that we need enabling policies. We have to ensure that we start at the very local level to shape those policies, empowering people to have a voice throughout. The fourth is that we need social entrepreneurs and innovators at the micro, small, and medium level leading this charge because they are the bedrock of the ecosystem. Usually we leave the ecosystem debates to the very large multinationals or the very large processors, but at the end of the day, the backbone of this sector is SMEs and we need to support them. And I love the work that's been being done around Asia, and I love the ideas that Lisa shared around that. Another idea, Louise and the whole team around regenerative agriculture and what we can do to ensure biodiversity and to ensure collective, that we think through the entire ecosystem and how to build climate sensitive, adaptive and resilient models. And then where Roy pushed us is to think about nutritious food and to think about the process of distributing nutritious food through markets, through an ecosystem in communities that ensures that we get nutritious food. And then the final point is the importance of communication, homegrown solutions, sharing, building bridges, and leveraging innovation and technology. I'm sure I missed other points, but that's what I heard coming out loud and clear. And I think we all need to work together to do this. The team has asked me again to remind you that if you want to be part of the subgroup, please join in. Because it's really, really critical that we hear your voice. And we just need maybe 5 to 7 people who will be part of this subgroup and can help us gather the policy papers. I just wanted to share the last slide I had, which was a quote. And I'll just put up the quote that motivates me in my work. I don't know if you guys can see this quote, but it's a quote by the late Kofi Annan. It says, the eradication of hunger is not an end in itself. It is a step towards sustainable development and progress in general. For a hungry man or woman is not a free man or woman. He cannot focus on anything else but securing his next meal. The truth is that if we can't address this food security issue in our society, we're not going to move forward. At the end of the day, food is medicine and it's fundamental to human existence. And it's fundamental to the social fabric of what we live and what we work, how we work. And what COVID-19 is doing is helping us rebuild and reimagine what this food ecosystem should look like. So thank you so much to everybody for your participation. Thank you to Jalu for the vision behind Catalyst 2030, and thank you to the team. I know that they have some final words before we have the poll. So let me pass it over to the Catalyst 2030 team.
Thank you, Ndidi. So thank you for this session. It has been a very productive session. We just wanted to let you know that we are planning to have another session with this great group in June 17 or 18. So I will just right now send a poll, and if you could just select in case you are interested in this. 1 second. Okay, actually the poll is not available, but we will be then in touch with you. After this session, you'll receive the feedback form. So yeah, we will keep in touch for sure.
Apologies, I gave more time for the poll because I thought we wanted to get your feedback on how we can make this better, but sadly, the poll is not working. So what we'll do is we'll send emails to everyone, and we have the recording of the session and the participant list, so we'll definitely share it for those who are open to being connected with each other and staying in touch with each other. This is just the beginning, and it's a teaser. I'm sure it's gotten a lot of us more excited and energized about the work. And for many of you, like I do, often feel alone in the work we do, and seeing great minds and like-minded people like my new chef friend in Brazil, Teresa, I'm energized to say, how can we work together across the board? Yeah, how can we work across the divide and across the board to learn from each other? We have common issues, we have common burdens, and we can nourish the world together. So thank you again for your time. Thank you to Louise. Thank you to Gisela. Thank you to Marie Lisa. Thank you to Roy. Thank you to Atsoko. Thank you to everybody for your participation and your passion. Please enjoy the rest of your day or evening and keep up the good work. God bless you all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.